Mr. David Parkson joins us now to talk about the forecast for the storm. We just have an update a little while ago from the weather
so
center.
I am literally just going over the latest update. The really interesting thing is we have picked up the maximum wind speed to 130 miles an hour at landfall time on Monday. That's a big change. It is a jump of a category. We're up to a Category 4 at landfall. So in terms of the actual current storm, there's not all that much of a difference that we have right now. But, you know, the storm's just going over nothing but warm water. And you can see right there it's going over 85 or 90 degree water. And that's going to allow it to go from a 2 to a 3 to a 4 and then make that landfall point somewhere potentially on the Space Coast. But in reality, again, trust the entirety of the cone, not just that center line. So anywhere in Florida, still fair game for a landfall. And then it will slowly start to make a northward turn. Now, the question is, does it kind of follow the trajectory of a Florida turnpike and then go off into the Gulf for a little bit and strengthen again before making another landfall on the Panhandle, or does it go up straight up north along I-75 in the western part of Florida? Those are all questions to be answered. There's also a question of just how fast it's going to be moving once it makes that landfall. A Category 4 storm with 130 mile an hour winds brings a lot of rain with it, a lot of storm surge with it. It is going to be a multi-pronged threat. And realistically, if you haven't made your plans and gotten everything done in Central Florida by Saturday evening, you're way too late. You can't be out on Sunday because that's when the tropical storm force winds begin. Then you get the hurricane force winds that evening, and then really the meat of the storm comes Monday morning.
And going from 3 to 4, Category 3 to 4, that's a big difference on storm surge. What are we talking about between 3 and 4?
We're talking about a storm surge that could potentially, in some spots, be up to 15 feet. Again,
and for people who don't get that, that's 15 feet of water.
That's a story and a half of a building.
Yeah.
And so the real problem that we've got with this storm is that you've got tons of these sort of inlets. You've got the intracoastal waterway. You've got all these bays that you're going to be running into, and that's really something that we've got to watch out to. We've got a high all the way up to the north that's going to push it down. It's got nowhere to go. It has to run into Florida. So the real problem is that even though you've got a storm that right now has wind speeds of 85 miles an hour, it is not going to be that way when it runs into the coast. And then you can see that 24 hours after making landfall nearly, it is still a Category 1 in the center of the state with 75 mile an hour winds.
And you mentioned this when we talked last time. People always pay attention to wind speeds, but that's not what they need to pay attention
to. So the killer always is storm surge and the flooding that comes with that, because again, you got nowhere to escape, right? So in reality, there's going to be about a 25-mile nugget of wind that is going to just absolutely wreck everything in its path. Outside of that nugget of wind, it'll take down some trees, it'll take down some power, but realistically, you're not going to have that as your primary concern. Anywhere on the coast from where it makes landfall, so the center of that landfall point to the north, so all the way up to the edge of that cone, I would say, all the way up to Savannah, Georgia, is going to be seeing some sort of storm surge, whether it's 1 to 3 feet, which is a nuisance, to 15 feet, which is deadly. That's just a question of the topography of your bay and exactly where this thing goes. But that's the thing you evacuate for. You don't evacuate for the wind, you evacuate for the storm surge. And then the freshwater flooding is a situation. You went through Harvey. You saw what all of that rain can do. This is not a Harvey situation in rain. But look, a foot of rain, a foot and a half of rain is still a lot of rain to get in 24 hours. It will cause flooding. It will have rivers rise, particularly in the Jacksonville area where they're already prone to it. There's a lot of threats that we've got to deal with, especially over the next day as we hone this forecast and really narrow down where this is going to be making landfall.
Of course, this is a Labor Day weekend. People are probably thinking of possibly doing something fun there on the Florida coast, but airlines have got to be making their own preparations. They don't wait for a hurricane to show up.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, by Sunday at noon, the planes are all done. I mean, if you wanted to get out, you can.
They're farther inland. Yeah.
You know, Florida's road system is heavily trafficked on a good day, so you're going to have bumper-to-bumper traffic. Don't head into Florida, please. Don't, try to get a couple of good days at the resorts and then hunker down. That's the thing, is don't put yourself unnecessarily in harm's way. We can't evacuate the whole state. But certainly if you're on a barrier island, if you're on, a Daytona Beach, Cocoa Beach, any of those kinds of places, Vero Beach, places where you're going to get that storm surge flooding, it's time to start figuring out what potentially your plans to move inland would be once we get a better confirmation of where this is going to go. We'll narrow it again down at 5 and 11 as well.
No, granted, a lot of the people in Florida last year, they had Michael. 2017 they had Irma and Maria, but Unfortunately, it's not very good when they're good at getting the heck out of the way. But there's people are going to be sticking around, which is why we're beating it into their head.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, right? And this is
no matter how much practice you have, you're still not ready.
Right. Well, so there's a couple really important things points to make. Irma. Remember when everyone freaked out in Irma because Miami was the center of the cone, and then it shifted to the west. But the west was never out of the cone. It was just not the center. That's the situation we're in right now. Anywhere in that cone is fair game, which is why you don't need to start evacuating now, but you just need to have a plan in the back of your mind so that when we narrow it down, we can say, okay, it's time to start going.
And the Florida governor's already talking to people, getting people ready, urging them to get ready. He even said he wasn't planning to come into Miami to talk about the hurricane since they thought, okay, we'll just wait. He was coming to talk about judges, but it's bearing down. He's paying attention to the National Hurricane Center, so a lot to watch. Next update, what time?
We'll get another update at 5 p.m.
From the Hurricane Center.
Yep.
Interesting.